Bienvenidos. My name is Jose Gonzalez, and I am full of gratitude and appreciation to be able to welcome and invite you to tonight's event, Elevate Conservation 2021. It is my pleasure to serve as MC for what is going to be a moment of celebration and an invitation to join us with some amazing panelists to talk about outdoor equity and the whole breadth of what that work means. And also we have some honorees tonight that really exemplify and embody that work and practice. I hope that all of you are comfortably at home or in some place that you can join us for this event. I want to start off by sharing a couple of things. First of all, my pronouns are he, him, his, although I'll respond to anything off of respect. That'll of course be most appropriate when your questions may be coming in, whether they are here through the webinar or over live on Facebook. And I am calling you all from the ancestral, traditional, stolen, and unceded lands of the Nisenan, Southern Maidu, Miwok, and among others, in what is at the moment Sacramento, California, Sacramento. And in continuing to welcome and set the space for the type of conversation we're going to have, we also have a special blessing and offering that is going to come, that is being offered on behalf of the Denver Singers. And for that, I would like to invite them now into the space, Francis Sherwood, who will be sharing with us an offering and a blessing in support of acknowledging our Indigenous brothers, sisters, and presence. Please take it away.
I'd like to say good afternoon, and I'd like to say thank you to Elevate Conservation for inviting us out and just to start your program off in a good way. And so what we're going to do here, I got a little sage burning, and just ask for you to pray in your own way and have good thoughts. And in our ways, we believe that, you know, when we're thinking of doing things, to think about the next 7 generations and how things are going to affect it. So as I send this offering to you guys, it may be received and bless your homes and bless your work, bless your families, and we're gonna ask you to be humble, be reverent, and we're gonna sing a song that comes from the Grass Dance Society, and it'll pay honor to today, and hopefully we'll have a good event, and with that we'll sing a song at this time. I hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the Denver Singers, Francis. Thank you for that offering and that gift to help support the space and for the conversation we're going to have. Very grateful for that. Receive with gratitude. Thank you. And as a reminder for all of our audience and participants that receive that, and please let that sit with you with the intention with which it is offered. And continuing with the support of a welcome, we also have a video from Senator Heinrich from New Mexico as a salutation into the space and event.
Hi, I'm Senator Martin Heinrich. It's an honor to join you for this year's Elevate Conservation Outdoors for All. Thank you for inviting me to share a few words on why it's so important to make our parks and our public lands places that everyone can enjoy. From my days as an outdoor educator to trips on public land with my own 2 boys, I've seen time and time again how getting outside can change a child's whole world. It can inspire a lifetime of commitment to conservation and build a real connection to place. And it encourages kids to pursue the health benefits that come with an active lifestyle. I think we all agree that outdoor opportunities should be accessible to all Americans, regardless of wealth or where you grow up or the color of your skin. To make that a reality, however, we have to address some very real barriers. And we need to recognize that while the livelihoods of people of color have long been rooted in the outdoors, they haven't always had equitable access to public lands. We must devote real resources to expanding opportunities for those in communities who've been historically excluded from outdoor experiences. I'm proud that my home state of New Mexico is showing real leadership on this issue. Our state created the first of its kind Outdoor Equity Fund to help community-driven programs that take kids from underserved communities on outdoor adventures. In the last year, we've seen California and Colorado create similar outdoor equity grant programs. I'm proud to be working with the powerful national group of leaders from diverse backgrounds and communities in the Outdoor Future Initiative to take this effort to the national level. I'm committed to introducing legislation later this year to address barriers in access to our public lands and provide new opportunities for kids from communities of color to engage in outdoor recreation. We need to build on our recent historic victories for conservation, like the Great American Outdoors Act, and make our parks and public lands places everyone can enjoy. Before I finish, I want to thank each of you for the work that you're doing in your communities. Keep it up. I encourage you to think of me as a partner and an ally in our mission to make our parks and public lands live up to their full promise as the places we all own and love. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate those welcomes at setting up the space. So now I will be moving into invitation our panelists for a conversation. And as a reminder for all audience members, if you're on the Facebook component, you can drop your question out there. But if you're joining us here on the webinar, a reminder that you can drop a question in the Q&A portion. And if it's specific to someone, to please write who it's for. And again, as a reminder, if you're just joining us, this is the 4th annual, believe it or not, Elevate Conservation Outdoors for All event, typically put on along with the Outdoor Retailer Summer Market. This comes on behalf of Colorado and national conservation organizations, outdoor industry companies, diverse community leaders, some of whom you'll see today and will be honored as well. Really to do the work of what is equitable outdoor access and policies and this idea of public lands that are accessible for all. So excited to be here with you all. And as I will mention the panelists, it will be both an opportunity for US panelists to come on screen, so to speak, and I'll defer to you making your own introductions in terms of how you'd like to be presented into the space. We are here with Colorado Representative Leslie Herod, who's the sponsor of the Colorado Outdoor Equity Bill. So Colorado joining the Outdoor Equity Club. We're also joined by Vasu Suchitra, Equity, Inclusion, Accessibility, and among many, many other things, advocate, and Angelo Vaca from the Utah Diné Pikeya, I was going to say organization, but really it's all of the work that helps to elevate the Bears Working Coalition. So Representative Herod, if you wouldn't mind I'll turn it over to you to kind of do your introduction that does more honor about sharing you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that introduction. Hey, everyone, I'm State Representative Leslie Herod. I represent House District 8, which is in Central and Northeast Denver. I'm also proud to be the first African-American LGBTQ person to hold elected office in Colorado, and I go by she, her, and hers pronouns. I'm really excited to have been the sponsor for the Outdoor Equity Bill right here in Colorado. As was mentioned by the Senator, we are the third state to provide funding for this amazing initiative. And what I will just say briefly, and I know we'll come back for more questions, is that the outdoors and our public lands really should be accessible to all. But because of discrimination, because of stigma, because of access issues and financial issues, it just doesn't happen. When I tell folks that I fly fish, which is something that my father taught me how to do, they look at me like, what? There are Black people who are fly fishing? And just get really shocked about the fact that I would even venture into those areas as a Black woman, especially when I go alone. And what I want to say is that there are so many amazing Black women now leading the movement to change that conversation, to say that we belong in these spaces. And in fact, they are spaces that we have historically and traditionally, and our heritage has come from. And so I'm really excited to be able to reclaim the outdoors and holistic healings on behalf of communities of color, especially the Black community, and look forward to working with all of our partners here to make sure that our public lands, public spaces are really accessible for all. But I've got another little issue that I'm working on, and another little reason why I ran this bill, which is because I hope that getting more people of color into the outdoors will create the next generation of conservationists, the next generation that looks more diverse, that looks more like this panel, and can make sure that we are making real change and protecting our planet for all of us. So thanks so much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Vasu?
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Vasu Sojitra, and I go by he, him pronouns. I'm on the lands of the Crow, Northern Cheyenne, Salish Kootenai, Shoshone Bannock, Blackfeet, and many others that is commonly known as Bozeman, Montana. I am a professional athlete by trade, as well as a disability access strategist, and I am also a disabled person of color. So you can't see it, but I'm sitting down and I have a right leg amputation, and I'm South Asian, Indian American by ethnicity. And I've been occasionally labeled friendly neighborhood disruptor when it comes to the outdoor industry, just to try to combat some of the status quo and some of the homogeneity that comes with the outdoor industry. So trying to elevate a lot of the narratives that we in this panel are trying to do when it comes to people of color, Black, Indigenous, queer, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, and disabled communities, adaptive communities out there. So with that, I have a motto that goes, ninja sticking through the woods to bring intersectionality to the outdoors. And I'm here representing Outdoor Futures Initiative, which is a more national outdoor equity fund that we are working to pass as a bill within the next couple of years. So yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Grateful you're here to join us, Vasu. Thank you and welcome. Angelo?
Hello, everybody. Yat Angelo Baka Yinisha, Flashtit Nishlink, he's Ani Bashishchin, My name is Angelo. I'm Navajo and Hopi. I just introduced myself in our traditional Navajo way with all of our clans from our fathers and our mother's side. And that tells you who I am and what my relations are. And incidentally, it's also a bit of a kind of land acknowledgement, if you will, because a lot of that affiliation in our clans are about the places that we come from. So we're actually stating the places that are tied to us. So like for me, with my first primary clan, Red Bottom clan, it has to do with the Colorado Plateau, the red dirt. So I'm from this Bears Ears region, from this area. I live and work in San Juan County. I've grown up here. I've had the opportunity to be the Cultural Resources Coordinator for Utah Diné, which is a Indigenous-led nonprofit, and it's dedicated to the healing and restoration of the people in the lands. Where our focus is on the Bears Ears landscape because of its cultural and spiritual significance. And of course, we work very closely with other partners, allies, organizations, nonprofits, and we do a lot of work around educating folks on how to work together in Indigenous communities in all the very gray areas that overlap with outdoor conservation folks, environmentalists, philanthropists, even everything as local and regional politics. So our vision is broad. We really are dedicated to, having Indigenous voices, representation, and community members be at the table when talking about our lands in particular. So thank you for having me here. I really appreciate being part of this panel.
Thank you, and we're so grateful that you can join us here. And we're going to come back to some of the points you just laid on the table. And I want to start still with a question for all of you, and then I'll invite you each to share your thought and response for it. And part of the conversation is often thought of like the outdoors as the social construct that's recreation oriented. That is, I think Representative Harry, you mentioned, right? It seems like it's for some people and less for others. And we often frame a lot of conversations around public lands are connected to kind of that framework. And then when it comes to environmental justice, that seems to be so centered on quote unquote communities of color, right? Like that's where our environmental fights are. And rightly so, because there's reasons for that. But the question is, what do you see as the connections between what is often referred to as quote unquote environmental justice, especially fights for clean air, clean land, clean water, which should be accessible to all, with this idea of public lands? Often what I think of like natural resources equity, right? What is outdoor justice work, just nature justice work in the same way? I'm curious to your thoughts on that connection and what's clear to you, maybe what you think is not clear to others, or how you make those connections. And Representative Harrod, if you would be interested in kicking us off.
Sure. I think you're asking a very interesting question. As someone who did not traditionally identify with the public lands conversation or the environmental movement in that way, I think that the question is really important, right? There's a reason why I didn't identify. It doesn't mean that I don't care about our land, right? It doesn't mean that I don't care about our communities. It really just meant that it didn't feel like it was for me. So just like, access to these spaces have been very limited, access to this movement and this work has been extremely limited and extremely white. And I believe that the environmental justice movement has really stepped up to say that people of color belong at the table for these conversations. And when you really want to talk about, climate justice, environmental justice, and this notion of public lands, and I put that in quotes intentionally, people of color, especially indigenous folks, need to be at the center of that conversation. And when we are not, you're not actually being authentic, right? It's not an authentic movement. And so I believe that we reclaimed the space and started adding justice to some of these words, because that is really what we're seeking. And it also signals that it is a space for people of color. And so I appreciate the kind of arms that are being wrapped around now this environmental justice movement. But I have to acknowledge that people of color have been pushed out of this movement for too long. And it was almost, in a way that our communities, it was okay to have, bad air, bad water, right? It was Flint, it's fine for them, but when we talk about other environmental policies, it really was focused on white folks who could afford to do certain things, right? And so I think it's really important that we center the work that we're doing now on environmental justice. And I appreciate those partners who are coming in to say, we need to do better, because communities that have been at the center of this movement for so long and really caretakers of our land have been pushed out. And so what can we do to be better? And I do think that, the movement around for Black lives and the kind of racial awakening that we had this past year has propelled all of these issues forward in a way that I very much appreciate. But again, we have to acknowledge that we have been left out of the conversation for so long.
Thank you. And I like how you stress that point over. It isn't just participation and engagement, but leadership. It is actual leadership beyond just being included. Vasu, a thought?
Yeah, definitely. So as an athlete, as being able to get access to so many resources now, which I don't think many disabled folks, especially disabled folks of color, have access to, I finally have been able to understand this land connection as a human. And we have in our Western world, I have ancestry in India who do not view it this way, of course, but in our Western world, we've separated the outdoors from our urban areas and this concept of wilderness from, these urban areas. So to try to protect them from this more colonial aspect of land extraction, because I know that, if we didn't have these aspects of wilderness right now, they would all be mining claims or getting, fracking permits and all these things that might be happening, which are happening in certain areas, of course. So, just trying to understand that we are part of nature, we are one and the same, and we have to all fight for that as we are in community with everyone around us, including the white folks who have primarily created a lot of these issues that are happening in a lot of communities of color. And we're just trying to make sure that we can work together, start redistributing a lot of those resources, whether primarily right now we're really looking for funding to be able to make sure that we're elevating a lot of these communities of color, that intersect with so many different identities, whether that be disabled or queer or trans. So just trying to make sure that, this word of justice still intersects not just within the environmental movement, but within the disability movement, within the racial movement, within all that's happening, because we can't keep compartmentalizing a lot of these spaces because we are all one and the same.
Thank you, Vasu. I think as that reminder said, it's expansive to hold more, right? We can't afford to have fragmentation or pieces that don't acknowledge that more holistic approach. And with that in mind, Angelo, I was wondering if you had a thought or response to the question.
Yeah, I really do think that it's interesting that we're really talking about all these different aspects of environmental justice, but environmental justice does encompass social, cultural, historical, and restorative justice. We're really talking about the true definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All you need to do is go outdoors to the environment and see all of our relatives that are out there and how diverse they are and how essential they are to the biodiversity and the health of our ecology, of our environment, of our living situation as it pertains to everything else that we share in this world. So it's kind of fascinating to me to watch a lot of folks sort of arrive late to that conclusion. But I think a lot of the folks who are not of that sort of dominant culture, Euro-American legacy or conditioning mentally, already instinctively have that, one, but two, culturally have that. And it doesn't matter if we have come at it from the side or head on, we still have a sensitivity towards that. And we really should have a heightened sense of the ways that we can normalize this and imbue that back into this kind of conservation framework in a way that makes it a different permutation, because everything that we've done before doesn't necessarily mean it's been effective or helpful. In a lot of ways, it's been damaging. So we have to think creatively, innovatively, and out of the box. I think the more voices at the table, the better that we have a chance for a collaborative solution.
Thank you, Angelo. And actually, we'll stick with you for this next question, if you don't mind answering first, and then inviting Representative Herrera Basu to offer their thoughts. And so you're mentioning kind of this, making this recognition and awareness in terms of how we're changing and expanding the framework. I had and even this event is called Elevate Conservation. And I recall a Native colleague once tell me, the word conservation comes with a lot of stuff that if we don't talk about it, don't expect me to embrace it with the same excitement you do, because it has meant different things in getting to this point. In the same way, the words like exploration or discovery comes with history of harm for communities on the land in the US as an example. And so my question is, what do you what do you recommend? What are you seeing? What is the work that you are pushing on others in terms of what it means to get this shift, this transition from how we have thought about quote unquote conservation to really be more inclusive, collaborative and representative in a way that does honor and ensure Indigenous voice and presence, for example, Native leadership, and what it means when we talk about like honoring the ancestors, that's actually done. That it isn't just words that are used, but that in your mind, you're saying, I'm actually seeing the work.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you're bringing up, because, what we have found is a lot of people don't have access to that kind of information or knowledge or education. And so we've kind of found ourselves, especially at Utah Diné-Bikéyah, being part of that. So we do a lot of training for folks who don't know about the Bears Ears tribal communities. And of course, the coalition is very broad. We've got about 5 nations, including many others who are our neighbors that are in support of our efforts. So we want to give like a very basic 101. And that's where we can only say so much, because, we only can speak for ourselves in our own communities. That's why, I'm here in my own land, sitting with my own power, because this is my land. And I can say that very deeply on both sides, even with my clan. On my Hopi clan side, I'm Corn clan, and I'm told that we originate out of Bears Ears. So we're talking about time immemorial ancestral line. So the things that I say and stand up for my community and for my lands here. Now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult across other Indigenous nations, and a little bit more of a reach to access those folks who can teach you and educate you on the right ways in interacting with their communities for real substantive change. And I think that's where people, especially in the conservation and environmental community, can really up their game, is they really need to start doing that research and making meaningful relationships so that they can connect to those communities, because they're still there. No matter how much you think that they're gone, or they might not have a reservation per se, or maybe they're not even federally recognized, they're always there and they always come back. And this is the biggest thing that we try to tell folks, is that our ancestral connection is down to our DNA. And there's nothing in us that says that we'll never give up the place that we love, that we come from. So we always want to emphasize that the onus is a lot on the other community members. We've been here for thousands of years, and we're still here, and we're still protectors of these lands. And I think that's why it's hard sometimes to have that conversation. It's uncomfortable to talk about settler colonialism, about, imposition on Indigenous or sacred lands, or even the troubled history of settler colonialism. But That's a lived reality that we have every single day. And if I were saying some of the things that I do and say now, even in this movement, even with my allied support, such as yourselves, 100 years ago, I would be imprisoned, maybe killed or worse, you know? So I don't have the luxury of not saying anything. And I think that's kind of another thing that people have to encounter about their power and the privilege as being part of this kind of community, is that they get to sort of do it as weekend warriors on their times off, on their vacations. But we Indigenous folks are on the frontline communities, and we don't get to have that privilege where we just take a day off. This is it. You know, we have to protect our lands, and we're not just doing it for us, we're doing it for everyone. And so I think we have to sort of like widen our gaze and understand the bigger picture and understand that the onus is on other folks. Really put themselves out there, really challenge themselves to learn, and really make those absolutely special, meaningful connections and relationships to Indigenous folks, because they're the ultimate stewards, and we always will be. And until we close that gap between this community and them, I don't think we're going to see a lot of real change.
Thank you so much, Angelo. And I think that's also a reminder that if we actually mean to undertake the work of restorative justice and reconciliation, it requires talking about the harm and understanding what settler colonialism was, is, and its impacts. And with that, Representative Herod, you know, even as an example, Colorado, right in the news, was just that the governor finally removed something that was on the books as an example that has existed, and it sits with us now. So I was wondering if you could offer any thoughts on what in terms of your work, that what this has meant in terms of Indigenous and Native solidarity.
Yeah, well, I think one, what the governor did, I think, was big for Colorado. It was big for white Colorado to at least acknowledge the harm that has been done. And it was also symbolic. You know, I think we really have to make sure that the work that we are doing has real impact and is really gonna, I think, move the needle on these issues of equality. And so when I think of, you know, my space in the movement, I often think of my grandma. She, you know, lived and grew up in Water Valley, Mississippi. Of course, you know, as a Black person in the South and Black family in the South, we have Indigenous blood because my family definitely were, you know, runaway slaves. And one thing that I remember with my grandma before she passed was that she was showing me through the photos, and she had a very specific section of the house that was dedicated to Native American peoples. And she told me that in her time, it was seen as problematic to say that you had Native American heritage and be Black, right? It was great to have light skin, but where did that light skin come from? Who knows, right? Like, and wanted to make sure that as we think about, and as I thought about, she didn't call it social justice, but just fairness and what is right, that we include all people, right? And we don't let discrimination happen to anyone. And she felt like Native American people in her experience were definitely, Indigenous folks were definitely discriminated against in her experience. And so she wanted us to fight back against that. So for me, when I think of what my role is in this equality and equity movement, or this movement for justice, it's really making sure that we're as inclusive as possible. And so, you know, yes, it's pushing the outdoor equity bill, but it's also making sure that I step back and allow Native folks Indigenous folks to step up when we're doing things like banning Indigenous mascots, right, throughout the state of Colorado, which we did, abolishing Columbus Day, which we did, and making sure that we are centering Indigenous voices in that conversation. And so what I really loved about this movement for outdoor equity is it's pulling together, again, a coalition of folks, a rainbow coalition of people of color, LGBTQ, folks with disabilities, lower income folks, to say, you know, what does equity and what does social justice really look like for us? What does it look like for in each and every space? And whose voices do we need to lift up to lead the conversation? And quite frankly, I believe a connection with our indigenous, brothers and sisters and two-spirited people is so very important as we're fighting as a community for equality.
Thank you so much. Well put. And Vasu, do you have any thoughts or response to that as well?
I mean, I don't actually remember the question you asked because the conversation's been quite riveting and captivating, so I totally spaced on that. But I mean, more so is just like, I always try to connect where I am coming from, my ancestry. I am a son of an immigrant family in the States, so I do identify as Indian American. I know where my parents have grown up. I've been there, connected with that space. And my parents have very much good sovereignty when it comes to being Gujarati Indian. And based on that, trying to bring that ideology back to, living in this country where there is very little sovereignty to the Native communities. So trying to really uplift, as Representative said, was just to, uplift those that have been most impacted, and how do we do that, and what support do they need? And that, I think, really comes from building trust, building connections with people in a genuine way, asking questions. Within the disability community, the two things I always tell when I'm teaching folks is hold yourself accountable, know how to apologize and move on, as well as ask for consent, making sure that, the things that we're doing is based on what these communities really are looking for. So that's what I try to always elevate. And that's kind of the work that we at Outdoor Future are trying to do as well, is making sure that the table is full of a diverse group of humans. We have, depending on the meetings, 10 to 12 to 15 people from all over the place, Native, disabled, queer, Black, Brown, Indigenous, which are trying to make this initiative possible, not just for ourselves, but our communities as well. So a really, really hopeful thing that we're trying to do, and all based on just building trust with each other and making sure that we're moving forward in a way that's productive and uplifting everyone in the process.
Thank you, Vasu. And as a quick follow-up to that, since one of you hold multifaceted identity, and you're also an athlete, right? You recreate in the outdoors through those ways. Have you found that, what have been your work and pushes and challenges to invite other fellow outdoor recreationists, right? Like maybe they start with Stoke. And so how do you get them to be out here even more whole, right? Like if your Stoke is on stolen land, what does it mean to really be connected to the land as a holistic entity, not just as your playground?
Yeah, that's been an interesting one, because athleticism in this country, at least what I know of, is very individualistic. So trying to help athletes, or at least share my narrative to make it less individualistic and start uplifting the communities that, one, I'm connected with, and having these conversations with other athletes to see what communities that they're connected with, and if they're not connected with any community, try to see how they can be. Just putting themselves out there, breaking out of their little bubbles that they might be in. That's been a bigger one. And also just, acknowledging the mass amount of privilege it takes to be an athlete in this country too. So, understanding that me as a disabled person of color have gotten so much support in the past 30 years to be where I'm at. And a lot of people, other athletes, white athletes, non-disabled athletes also have had that support. It's not a bootstrap mentality. It never has been. So just trying to make sure that people know that this country isn't built with bootstraps, but also with a ton of support and ton of privilege when it comes to land access, to other resources, to acquiring something as little as ski equipment, you name it. So, just trying to make sure that people are aware of those concepts.
They can be North Face straps, right? With all respect.
Exactly.
And with that, we'll move to our last question. So Representative Herod, if you wouldn't mind kicking this off. So, I mean, speaking of support, right? Speaking of what helps provide some of that cultural and physical access to these spaces. So Colorado, as was noted already, it's kind of the third state to create an outdoor equity fund, which is one of many strategies to kind of ensure more equitable access to outdoors. So Representative, is there anything you can share more about how that program will work, what you're excited about? If for someone maybe hearing it for the first time, why?
I am extremely excited about this. And I'll just say that, listen, I was served on the Judiciary Committee as the vice chair and the Finance Committee as the chair of finance. And I moved over recently to the Joint Budget Committee because that's really where the rubber hit the road. I was seeing that we were passing great bills that had, great values that align with everything I stand for. But then when it came to actually putting our money where our mouth is, money went elsewhere, and it didn't actually come into our communities. And so I joined the Joint Budget Committee as one of the few members. We have 6 members total to make, and I'm the only African-American member and the only African-American member from the House since 1991, I believe. Okay. 1991. And so I joined because I said, I want to make sure that we are moving money in an equitable fashion. And so when the coalition came to me and said, we want this outdoor equity bill, can you help? The initial strategy for funding it fell apart, right? I mean, that happens all the time. But now that I'm on this committee, we were able to say, no, just because that fell apart doesn't mean there's not another funding stream that has been dedicated to white-led initiatives for so long, which is our lottery dollars, and so we moved lottery dollars and kind of siphoned some off into the outdoor equity fund to create a sustainable fund that I didn't have to lobby and vote on every single year as a budget member or as a community member, but instead knew that it was going to go there and that it was a protected amount of money. Now, I think we all know kind of the premise behind these outdoor equity bills, which is to get more people of color, more disabled folks, more low-income folks, more LGBTQ people in the outdoors by supporting organizations on the ground that already do the work, right? But what I love about the way that we crafted this bill, I should say, and what I love about the way that we crafted this bill is that we said that not only will this funding go into these communities, but the board that makes the decision must be of the community too. And so we outlined every single board slot that was the decision maker, final decision maker on where this money went, and said they must be representative of this community, of this community, of this community, of this community. And I don't care how hard people think it is to find a Black person who cares about the outdoors or someone who has a disability who cares about the outdoors, you're gonna find it if you wanna put this board together, right? And so I think that was really important, was to make sure that folks who look like us were at the decision-making table so that we can ensure that programs actually were representative of our communities. And so just this morning, I was actually at a coffee shop and I ran into a white man who helped work on this bill, who's overseeing the agency, who was interviewing for these positions. And he, thinking about how that looked, right? You've got a white man interviewing for this board that is, primarily going to be people of color, and knowing that traditionally that white man would have been the only one to make the decision about where this money goes, and had been the only person to make that decision, but now has to really cede some of his power into this space. And I get to have input, right? So I definitely co-signed on my friend who was applying for the board. And the program that really excited me about, and this is just an example of one program, was that, of course, we're going to fund equipment, right? We know that the economic barriers to the outdoors are extremely high. But also he said, if it doesn't feel like us, we're not going to do it. So he's creating a backpack program that has food that's representative of the cultures that we are trying to get to participate in these programs. So acknowledging that these kids don't have access to backpacks, our kids don't maybe have access to lunch or food during these type of events, and saying, not only, we're not going to just put a granola bar in there that you're never going to eat or like or want to ever see again. We're going to put in healthy foods that actually are responsive and reflective of your community. That's someone who gets it, right? That's someone who gets that we want to make the experience something that is not only a whitewashed experience, but one that truly feels like it's coming from the community, so that our kids feel like it's theirs and can really own it and have a great time. And so I'm just so excited to see kind of where this program goes. And I do expect all of our lovely white-led organizations and businesses who say they care about equity to then also come and fund this outdoor equity program and fund the organizations that we co-sign on and that we are sponsoring as well. And so I'm really excited about the possibilities. I'm really excited for the movement. And again, I've got to thank the senator for also helping to lead this movement. We are going to see these bills across the country. We need to, and I think it's going to have huge impacts for not only getting these folks, our people, into the outdoors, but really our own empowerment, our own mental health, and our connection to our ancestral holistic healing. So I'm excited.
Thank you so much. And a good reminder of how it helps us shift from, I've often said, having our communities be the objects of programming. Let's just get more Black and brown youth, for example, in the outdoors, without asking who's in the leadership decision makings for that. And so it moves it into that. Vasu, any quick or final thought in relation to that, of how that connects to and helps shape the national effort in terms of an outdoor equity fund?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything Representative was saying, is the fact that, and this is what Jessica Loya, who's a cohort of ours in the Outdoor Future Initiative, she vocalized this, and I really resonated with it, was that the answers to the issues within these communities are in the communities. So we have to have the people that are impacted by these issues at the table, because we're the ones living and breathing it. And without that, it just does not create a genuine path towards reconciliation, liberation, freedom, whatever you want to name it. So that's kind of the idea. And, you know, we want to be the bakers of this pie. We want to be the ones that are creating this initiative because it's impacting our communities the most. So, you know, that's the idea. You know, the Colorado one is, of course, an amazing opportunity to see how it works and how it goes. I mean, I can only be hopeful about it just because it's so important to start redistributing funds to a lot of these communities. So yeah, I'm more power to it, and I'm really, you know, making sure that we get the job done as well when it comes to the Outdoor Future Act and on a federal level.
Thank you, Vasu.
And I'm so sorry. Do you mind if I just say one more thing?
Not at all.
You keep something in my head, and I really appreciate it, which is the fact that our organizations, I mean, our people have been doing this work for free for too long. You know, and so not only are we redistributing these funds, but we're actually paying our folks to do this work, right? Which I think is so important, because I'm sick and tired of us having to like scrape for the bottom of the barrel, meanwhile having 27 loads of issues on our back that we're carrying and still not being able to make ends meet in a society, in a capitalistic society that doesn't support our contributions. And so I'm just really excited that we're also creating these funds so that our folks are getting paid for the hard work that they're doing to lift up our communities.
Thank you so much. And that connects well to Vasu's point of also ensuring those aren't just crumbs, and you're not just fighting for a slice of pie, you're in the kitchen baking as well. So well put, Vasu. So thank you.
I'll give it all to Jessica. That was all Jessica.
Love it. So we're going to transition actually to another exciting part. And Representative Herod, I know you may need to leave us shortly, but as long as you can stick with us, you're welcome. And Angelo, welcome back. I see you're able to join us by phone. Just connectivity issues. It is the life that we are at the moment. But we're going to move to this exciting part of honorees. Speaking of people doing the work, and so we have three. There's always many, but at least in this point, we're focusing on three type of honorees in terms of the work that's being done. Who's out there doing this? And in terms of our honorees are representative of this scope of work. Today I'll mention each of them first, and then I'll invite each one of them to kind of share a little bit about them. We have Loreda Pineda, who is the just kind of former, just fresh new, right, Executive Director of Environmental Learning for Kids, ELK, that can speak to a lot of the work that ELK has been undertaken in Colorado, especially Mount Velo neighborhood. We're also joined by Patricia Ann Cameron, founder and executive director of Black Packers. Speaking of two individuals that are culturally responsive doing the work. And then also Angel Peña, not just Pena, Angel Peña, with a bunch of other hats, but of course also as executive director of Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project, which helped get going the Outdoor Equity Fund in New Mexico, with the support, of course, of Representative Rubio. So I want to make this point. He'll be speaking a little bit on behalf of outdoor equity funds, such as the one in New Mexico, Colorado, and California. By the way, all of those three funds, it was not white men that got it going. It was really women leadership in full diversity. So Representative Herod in Colorado, Representative Rubio in New Mexico, and Assemblymember Limon, now State Senator Limon in California. So examples of women of color leading the way. So with that, Loretta, if you would like to take a couple of minutes to share a lot about you and the work, and congratulations, you are honored for what you have been doing every single day for that many years.
Thank you, Jose, and thanks everyone, and good evening. Yes, thank you for this honor and for honoring elk and the work that we've been doing in Montbello, actually for 25 years. So when you talk that we've been in this space, we have all been in this space a long time and are, really looking forward to, just opening up the Montbello open space. It's open now. We had it open this summer for a lot of our programming and activities. And we're in the process of building an education center on what was once a 5-acre site that was a vacant lot. And it could have easily been turned into another warehouse in Montbello. But through some foresight, through some good partners at Denver Parks and Recreation and also the Trust for Public Land, we're holding them to this long-term commitment where they want to be in our communities, but we're holding them to what I want to echo is the next 7 generations. I mean, that was so powerful this evening to hear about why we do this work. We do this work for the next generations. And so, I'm going to hold them to the fact that they want to see this kind of open space and green space in our communities. And we have been working for a long time. So I want to thank all of the partners, the community, the ELK staff, the staff people who work behind the scenes, our families and students, and all of the partners and people who help fund this. So thanks so much, and come visit us in Montbello. And you can also find out more about our project on our website at www.elkkids.org. And thank you again, and thank you all for all of the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Loretta. And donate accordingly when you find that donate button. Elk. And next up, we have Patricia. I could go on for many things about how I think the wonderful work that you're doing, but I will defer to you to speak for yourself.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you all for recognizing Black Packers and the work we've been doing in Colorado. We're super stoked to be represented here among so many people that have been doing so many amazing things themselves, and especially in Colorado. Just want to shout out our rep here who's putting in the work for us. I think everything that everybody has said already kind of represents what Black Packers is trying to do. So just to quickly go over what we do with Black Packers, we try to work on the financial portion of going outdoors. So we work on providing gear, transportation, and education in the outdoors to each person that comes out. For instance, we just led a backpacking trip this last weekend where all gear and transportation was provided and outdoor education was given as well. We take people up skiing and pay for their gear, apparel, their lift ticket, and a half-day lesson, something that I think is valued individually at $409 per person, and our participants get it for free. And we do this, as we talked about, redistributing wealth in this country and getting it from those who've had greater access to it to those who've had less access to it. So we had some great partners in Colorado Springs and Colorado and throughout the country to help us do that. I think that's about all I want to say about it, except to thank everyone who has been a part of it, to check out coloradoblackpackers.com for our future events, how to partner, and of course, how to donate, because we're a nonprofit and that's how it goes. Some upcoming amazing things we have going on is an aquatics program, which is going to teach families how to swim, everyone from grandma to grandson, whoever that is, teach them how to swim and get them water safe. Of course, skiing and snowboarding is coming back, and we're always leading camping and backpacking trips. So thank you so much again, and I'm honored to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patricia. And for all of these, of course, in addition to looking for ways to partner and contribute, donate, provide resources, you can also give them a follow on social media. And then next up, Angel Peña. Okay, I want to make sure we honor your last name since it's too often dishonored by an Anglo-dominant culture. To make sure that you're here to speak a little bit on, obviously the work of Nuestra Tierra, but really what that means in the context of the outdoor equity funds, which are spreading like good fire, not bad fire.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jose. And gracias, compañeros, Madam Harold. Truly, nothing but an honor to accept this award on behalf of my co-conspirators, especially from you all as individuals, and Elevate Conservation because of what it stands for. Exciting stuff. My name is Ángel Damián Soto Peña, and I am calling in from the stolen lands and broken treaties of the Jornada Mogollón, today, New Mexico, here on the southern frontera, Las Cruces. I'm first the father of three, partner to a frontline educator, and then the founding executive director of the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project. And this quest for equity in the outdoors happened early for us, especially in partnership with our leaders and again, our co-conspirators such as State Representative Angelica Rubio. It was after quickly spending countless days and hours with New Mexico youth out on the lands and waters that the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project created the strategy, cultivated the team, and then led the charge to create the first of its kind, New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund in 2019. This year, as we love to do, we're powering forward, and the fund will be empowering tens of thousands of deliberately overlooked New Mexico youth. And we believe that these outdoor equity fund efforts are best led and led and most effective when people with lived experiences in racially and ethnically diverse communities across our country are the tip of the spear. And on the heels of the three major successful outdoor equity grant programs created in the state of New Mexico's, Califas, California, and Colorado, those organizations are excited to continue the momentum and launch these efforts alongside like-minded partners and congressional champions. We've all come together to create and introduce the first of its kind Outdoor Future initiative. Future standing for Fund for Underrepresented Tribal, Urban, and Rural Equity. The outdoor future, the definition of success for us is truly to empower and recognize and acknowledge just how intertwined our lands, waters, and the environment are with issues centered around justice, race, and equity. And it is with gratitude and a warm heart to say, on behalf of our co-conspirators and partners, un mil gracias and super thank you. Yes.
Gracias. Thank you so much, Angel. And so with that, again, kind of round of applause for our honorees. They are examples of the work that is going on. And I know it goes on regardless of being honored or not, although I would like to presume it's a nice touch to recognize the work that you've either been doing for the past 2, 3, 5, 25 plus years. So thank you for all that you do and for the inspiration. Really, but beyond the inspiration, I think for the hope and the real action that you're providing with community. And so with this, we're to our closing to be able to provide a few minutes for any audience questions that have come up. For any questions, if you have them, drop them either on the Facebook side with the chat. They'll be monitored and scooped up, as well as here through the Q&A. We do have one question to start off with, and this will be open. So if anybody in honorees or panelists are still with us and visible, you're welcome to take your crack at it or have your response for it. The question that we have is the national effort for outdoor equity engaging natural resource management agencies leadership and asking them to work on taking down the ever-increasing barriers to entry-level employment that isn't just fire jobs and increasing access to permanent job opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and people of color individuals. Is the Civilian Climate Corps the answer? How far are we from making this a reality? So there's quite a bit in there. You're all welcome to either tackle all of it, pieces of it, or even just your own reflections. And unmute yourself accordingly.
I saw Vasu come back on screen, and he's one of our Outdoor Future Initiative leaders and would love to create space for me.
Man, I was going to pass it off to you because this is a very complex question, of course, but a lot of our focus is within outdoor organizations that are doing the work already, but we are expanding and seeing what is possible when it comes to creating. We don't want to personally create programming. We want to provide the funds to the programs that are already out there to break down these barriers through financial resources, whatever whatever kind of resources that can be available. So that's the idea. I don't know if Angel, you have anything to add to that, but that's what we've been trying to focus on.
Yes, absolutely. And just to kind of call out, we've never been here before, right? But we're very excited to, alongside with our green group partners, if you will, help redefine what this 21st century of conservation means and looks like. For us, for the Outdoor Future Initiative, it's much more than the charismatic flora and fauna, but it's really about, again, acknowledging culture, tradition, and our deliberately overlooked communities and prioritizing the breaking down of barriers. We acknowledge we are not the pro at every level, at every step. We acknowledge that a vision without resources is little more than a hallucination. And so we are taking our lived experiences and trying to create and think of policy solutions that can really lead this movement in a creative way. So yes, there was a lot there, but thank you for the question. That was awesome.
No, thank you. Loretta or Patricia or others, do you want to make sure if you wanted to speak to it, you're welcome to.
Yes, I just wanted to, there are a lot of organizations and groups that have, like conservation corps and others that are really ready to step up to, the climate challenge and to a lot of these environmental, particularly with the funding that's coming forward from a lot of these natural resource agencies. And, I'd like to give a shout out to Conservation Legacy that, they have an ancestral lands program and other programs that are really at the forefront of looking at, how do we engage, all of us in this work. And, part of it is that we've been relying on our young people and people that, we aren't paying enough. We aren't, the wages just aren't there for a living wage for a lot of these young people who want to be involved and who want to work on the land. And so we've got to do something about that. And I know that a lot of these conservation corps and others are doing a lot to try to raise up that work because we're really going to need it in the future. And, it's something that the natural resource agencies have to quit relying on us to do basically this work for free. And so, it's one way to lift people up, to provide professional development, to get to that point where Representative Herod talked about, she wants to see, the next natural resource leaders coming from this movement. So, I think that's one thing we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you so much, Loretta. Maybe I'll use this to transition to our second question, and probably we might close it with this question. So this was originally a question for Representative Herod, who unfortunately had to leave, but I think it can provide an opportunity for all of you to answer in your own respective way if you wish. Because the question was, how will you measure the success of the Outdoor Equity Bill? What metrics are being used to gauge the progress being made towards equity and justice? And I think that's probably a question that's really applicable to all the work that you do, right? You're doing this as you are probably facing those questions from grant deliverables and outputs that have traditionally been used to measure success in a new way. And you are likely pushing to be able to say, yeah, we need to probably rethink and look at that differently. So what does success look like to you? And again, you can unmute as you feel inspired.
I would like to just mention that outside of, like you're saying, the standard metrics that I do after events or for grant reporting, I think what Blackpackers is hoping to do, and I see that mirrored in the work that a lot of people or everyone in the space is trying to do, is I'm trying to change how it looks on the back end. As somebody who spends a lot of time going to like outdoor retailer or these conventions, and I look around and I might see people of color, walking the floor, but who is at the head of the companies and who's representing the companies there? And so it is my hope that these events and access to the outdoors will provide economic opportunities for people in the outdoors. And hopefully that will also change, wealth issues and wealth inequities, at least here in Colorado where I can see it the most. I'm not sure how I would measure justice in that sense, but how we've been approaching it is I want to get more jobs in the outdoors into more people's hands. And that means I have to get them the education and the access to do that.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Anyone else?
Last thing I'm going to say, I feel like I'm talking too much here, and I wrote down some notes, and just want to call out initially that I'm speaking only for myself as I'm trying to figure out this game, right? We've never been here before. People of color have never, we've never been at the front of the line, right? People on the front lines. So speaking for myself, but success for me is not to fix the problem. I will admit that I am not that cool, smart, or cute to figure out a couple of 100 years worth of oppression and inequality. For me, a father of 3, I am excited to build a foundation and begin to ask the right questions to set up my kiddos for success so they can really figure out this problem. Because I also want to call out that I don't know that anyone, or I have yet to meet anyone that I think has the answer to centuries of racism, exclusion, and oppression. And so success for me is to begin momentum, create momentum, and set up our next folks up for success so they can continue to charge in the right direction. And that's, of course, forward. And so that's my answer.
Gracias, Angel. And Angelo, I wasn't sure. Welcome back. I want to provide you an opportunity if you wanted to, if you had a thought or response on that question as well.
Well, I think this kind of speaks to the larger problem of all these interesting, complicated situations that we find ourselves in, is that there is no one thing that can tell us that we're successfully on the right path. I think that it is going to take that 7 generations thinking ahead, going to be long-term investments, and it's going against all the things that kind of got us here in the first place, you know, short-term rewards and access to resources that other people didn't have. And, you know, we're all kind of suffering for that at the moment with climate change and water, and even simple things like healthcare for the COVID crisis. Indigenous communities are the ones that have been, again, most vulnerable in that respect. And I think that's kind of an indication of, you know, where we're going and how much time it's going to take for us to reverse our direction. So I think it's going to take a lot of investment in the youth, but with an eye towards the past, that we can rely on the elders for leadership and our traditional knowledge holders who have passed on that knowledge and that wisdom from generation to generation, and just keep all of that in perspective, knowing that we only have a short time here in the world, and that we have to use it very wisely for our future investment in our younger generations.
Thank you so much, Angelo. And to close us off, I'm going to invite, of course, panelists and honorees. I believe you have chat access to send a message to everyone. Just make sure you have selected the everyone and not just host and panelists, because there's a question about how to stay connected to this type of community. So I'm inviting you all to drop in links to collectives, your own work, you know, as a resource, so that somebody wants to make sure, maybe for the new, it's new to them to be able to really connect to your work. All audience participants, same thing, give yourself shout out, give shout outs to who you see doing the good work, who you think you want to make sure others are out there, so you can make this community visible. For example, the Ancestral Lands program that Loretta mentioned, they also were just honored with an Outdoor Inspiration Award at Outdoor Retailer. So it's this, and they're not new. They've been doing that work for quite some time. So I think shouting each other collectively out in that way can help. So drop that in the chat, put that in there. And I'm going to close us out by reading a very short piece of passage from the book called Joyful Militancy, Building Thriving Resistance in Toxic Times, because it gives me connection and hope in terms of how we're doing this work and what it can look like 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. and how very different it better be than 100 years ago, as Angelo mentioned, right? When oppression was even more deadly. It's still deadly, but I think it's a reminder of that justice-oriented arc. Some of you may have heard me share this, but it's a piece that gives me hope. We can't all be friends, and some forms of life will never be compatible. This is the ethical basis of the logic of affinity as well. It can never be a totally inclusive come one, come all process, because this would mean welcoming the worst of empire and all of its toxic ways of relating. Some differences might mean that people cannot work together. Maybe. Differences might also signal potential for practices, orientations, and priorities that are resonant and complementary without becoming the same. Differences might then become starting points for new complicities and the growth of shared power. If relationships are what compose the world and what shape our desires, values, and capacities, then freedom is the capacity to participate more actively in this process of composition. Friendship and resistance are interconnected. When we are supported, we are more willing to confront that which threatens to destroy our worlds. Friendship and affinity are not things, but processes and open questions, which produce partial responses, further questions, flashes of certainty and confidence, but never definitive answers. I think to me that speaks a little bit to what Angelo shared. So with that, gracias. Thank you all. Receive with gratitude. There will be a recording of this available future. We hope you hung out with us and learned, as well as we're grateful to have you in community. Until next time, thank you all.